as you know, even though our book is not very big, it's full of information. So, first of all, I want to thank Jackie and this new lovely coffee house. I remember it being the Hampshire jewelry. Is that correct? My first set of dishes about 59 years ago here. So it has some memories. And but anyway, I thank you all for having us. This is a delight to come back to Romney. I've worked here 32 years, and a friend here, Beth, has worked here also. So we were just saying it's nice to come back to Romney. I feel like I spent almost half of my life here. But anyway, thank you, this history group. And first of all, I want to say we're not authors or historians, although we have a lady here that... I don't think so, but we all love history. And the way we really dived into this book was through the Capon Bridge Library. And in 2010, the Founders Day asked the library and folks in businesses in Capon Bridge to think about what we could do to contribute to Founders Day 2010. So our first mission was to honor the older homes and places, schools, churches, and the inns, but we started with just one home. So through the years it collected and collected. And at a board meeting, we all decided that, gosh, we've got all this wonderful information, and we sort of mulled it around our table, and we said, let's just try to collect more and more and create a book. And we first started out, well, this would be a good fundraiser, but writing books is not cheap. So we were very fortunate to have Jai Giffen. He was a hometown boy that did well, went to WVU, and he's a publisher of a lot of the pro football games, football teams, and mostly the college teams. So he was stepped up, and his parents, Ronnie and Sue Giffen, they're not here tonight, but they helped us with the committee, and they had a lot of input. But he now lives in Oregon, but every time he'd fly back, he would meet with us and talk to us about the book and gave us a lot of help. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I do want to introduce to you and tell you that we had 10 people. Our library board consists of 5, and they're all on this committee, which is Barbara Serball, she's our president, Stephen Serball, her son, and you'll hear the Giffen name quite a bit. And this is Beth, who is one of our new committee members. Not that new, but we say I've been on the board for 30-some years. She's been on the board for 5, 6. She's a new.
Something.
Did I lose you?
You got it.
Okay. And one of our technical young people in our community, Mike Lee, was certainly a big contributor. And we're certainly fortunate to have a young man in his 30s that loves history. And we're trying to get him on the Historical Society. He is an amazing young man. And he's spent a lot of hours, even with a very young family, we would meet 2 times a week, almost 2 times, averaging 2 times a week for 3.5 years. And it's been a journey, but it's been a journey of love of our history and preserving our town. And we've had other members, also Ronnie and Sue Giffen, Dick Serball, and my husband Rick Davy. Let's see, who am I missing, guys? Debbie Boyce, who has written 2 books in the Yellow Springs Highview area called Capon Folks and Capon Notes. And those 2 books are at our library. Correct, Nancy? Are they still there for sale? But that has a lot of information, too, that we have devoted some of our time collecting her information, which...
Bobby and Jenny.
Yeah, Bobby and Jenny Lovett, who tragically passed in a fire in our town. That was a tragic situation. They were wonderful local people that offered their services, but they will be sadly missed. And last but not least is our Brenda Hiett, Oates Hiett. And you'll hear Oates throughout our book or read about our book, if you get a copy, and we want to honor your own Romney, Dan Oates, who is really part of our ownership too. He's an Oates, and they're cousins. So we were very pleased to have him and his input and influence.
Well, and Norwood Haynes, who's one of Romney's oldest living residents at 103, his mother was an Oates.
So there's a lot of connections. So we wanted to, our mission tonight, and thank you for having us, is to give you some insight of our end of the county and bring our county closer together. And I really feel by the interest in your group and our group, history is alive and well, and hopefully will keep going. So before we get into the meat of our story, we had a man, Dr. Wilmer Kearns, and he has written several books that are in our library about the Capon Valley, Capon Bridge, and surrounding areas. Amazing man. Will be 92 years old. He now lives in a retirement village in Harrisonburg. He has driven up to visit with us 3 times. He drives up in a Prius, and he texts, and he types, and he emails. He does it all. He's better than most of us. But anyway, he was such an influence, and I would send him emails. He would look at it, read it, send it back, and had wonderful suggestions, as well as Dan when we were going through this process. We also honor Charlie Hall, who is an expert in history of the Fort Edwards Inn. And there were so many more people that wrote books about Hampshire County that we need to say we weren't writers. We just did the research of folks that had done work before us, and we gave them honor in our back of our resources in our book. So I think I want to be sure I cover and thank everybody, because we wouldn't be here tonight. Now, sitting at the projector and fiddling Goddard Tech person is our own director of Capon Bridge Library, Nancy Meade. And she is the go-getter, the innovator, the creator, and she has made our library come alive. And all we have to do is say, Nancy, will you do this? And it's done. And we could not be here either without her help. Brenda and I are very grateful for these 2 younger people bringing our stuff in. But anyway, we want to get going with the beginnings of, and I may need to refer, but we just want you to have an idea of how we have felt. We kind of know all these early settlers that came across the mountain in 1700s. We feel like we know these people, and our imagination. We've learned so much ourselves. I think that's what we talk a lot about. Wonder if how those people really were, but their struggles of coming across the mountain really began in the early 1700s of the pioneers that came across now Bear Garden Mountain, and Brenda will give you more of an insight on the wagon roads and the struggles that they had coming across. But there was 2 key people, James Edwards and James Edwards and Joseph. And I wanted to be sure to let you know that this young man sitting back here is a 6-time generation. 5-time. I missed a generation. I was giving you more credit.
I'm 30 years old.
You're 30 years. Okay, that explains it. But anyway, the Oates family truly is. It all comes down, and the Oates family is a 5th generation of Joseph Edwards, and the beautiful visitor center at Capon Bridge was really initiated by Charlie Hall, and it's open, it's beautiful, and they're up and running. And we wanted to tell you that he has invested his life really in the research of the Fort Edwards Inn. And I wanted to go back a minute. Wilbur Kearns and Charlie Hall both have been instrumental in this very beginning of our process of the book. And they have given us all of their books, all of their documents. Some are one of a kind, very old and fragile. He's given us the whole box of the Advocate. If anybody is familiar with the Advocate, we've got all the copies now in the book. And Dan, as you know, can just scan everything. So we have our history forever in safekeeping. So we're so happy about that. We want to breeze through some of the initial parts of the book, and then we have some photos that we can look at the end. We don't want it. There's a lot of photos, so when we go through them, we will do some explanation of what they are and who they are. But just going back to James Edwards for Joseph Edwards and James Cotty. Always Joseph and James are a little bit, but wanted to tell you a little bit about James Cotty. They came here and they lived here quite a few years before they were granted large acreage. James Cotty had a patent from Lord Fairfax for 358 acres, and Joseph Edwards was granted 400 acres about the same time. We had a discussion. We wondered if they were really friends or not. We don't know that part. But they did agree upon where the line was drawn. And Joseph Edwards had the northern side, 400 acres, and James Cotty had the southern side. And it was divided by the Capon River. And but they were compatible, we think. And they did markings on each side of the river to say whose land it was. They had to identify that to help other people know where there were squatters and other people there. So they had to know where their line was drawn. They wrote their initials on a huge boulder at the end of Bear Garden Mountain. Everybody familiar with Bear Garden Mountain? Okay. There was a huge boulder that it's been searched to try to find, that they carved the initials, Edwards and Cotty, and the initials are EIC. And the other boulder was at the foot of, well, not at the foot, but the foot of Dillon's Run, which pours right into the Capon River, right by the bridge, before you cross the bridge, to the right, going east, down near the bridge. Of course, floods and other things have gotten in the way there, and it can't be found. And we think the boulder probably near the river went on through the river and down. But anyway, I guess their agreement was that. And of course, James Cotty was noted as the Indian fighter. And but he was not only the Indian fighter, he did a lot of other things in the town too. He was a very brilliant man, I think, and very well respected. And he served as, an advocate for the different parts of politics too. And he's most noted for, though, as the Indian fighter. But just to know, he was more than that. He was, I guess, a very brave man, because he was chased by the Indians, and this is a quick story, all the way down to Bloomery, which is several miles from Capon Bridge, with the Indians on his heels. But he was a brilliant man, or a very smart Western type hero, and he climbed a huge mountain that is now ownership of the Johnson family, and its name now is Cottage Castle, or Castle Rock. He climbed that mountain apparently, and with the butt of his rifle, he knocked them off one by one. He hid behind a rock and knocked them off one by one. And out of respect for him for being so brave, the Indians buried an Indian was buried at his burial site beside him. And we can confirm that as being true by the Cotty family, that has done a total genealogy and history of James Cotty. So, I have to come back to say, the burial site is just maybe a quarter of a mile from Route 50 going up River Road. And he's buried there when a plaque was done by the Rotary Club. that Beth's dad was initiated that, and the plaque is there, still a little dark, but it's still there. It can be seen. You'll see some photographs that are, it's a beautiful farm that he's buried on, and that's the Beeler property. And then, of course, Joseph Edwards was known as fort builder, and he's given total credit for building the fort himself, but it's kind of questionable if he did that all by himself. But anyway, there's a lot of history there. Of course, Charlie Hall wrote some grants with some others to come in and try to find exactly where the fort was built, but they did find where it was indicated, and they did some digs by writing grants and found a lot of archaeological things that is placed now in the museum, so that's for you to view too. But he was very wealthy when he came here. His family came from Pennsylvania, I believe, initially to the Virginias, and he was very well respected, and he got into politics, and Brenda will explain a little bit about the wagon road here in a little bit. And but when he passed away, there was some debate about his will. He had 20 grandchildren, but he only left his property and his wares to 3 of them. One of his grandsons lived with him, Samuel, most of his elderly years, I think. We don't know exactly how long he stayed with them, but anyway, he lived with his grandfather. The other 2, am I right on that, Brenda? The other 2 were Pew children, but one of those grandsons was also named Samuel. But anyway, when Joseph passed away, there was a dispute and a lawsuit, and anyway, it went to court because Samuel, that lived with the grandson, said that his granddad wanted to give him, he wanted him to have all of the property, all of it. And anyway, several years went by, and because it took a while to go through the process, but anyway, it was defined that he did indeed get the property. That was a little odd, but that brought about, you can imagine some family issues. But they agreed, and they divided the land. And anyway, the rest of the story, we don't know what happened to the children and how all that panned out. But a lot of the Pugh family, who was a daughter married into the Pugh family, are buried on the, I think, at the northeast side of the river. Is that correct? Along that river. But anyway, we think they're there. We don't know exactly where. But anyway, there's a whole lot more to that story. But I'll stop there, and Brenda will go on with the wagon road.
I'm not sure how to operate this. Do I have it on? Can you all hear me?
Plus sign there, turn it up.
Okay. Turn it up.
Or give her your headset.
Can you hear me now? Maybe we have, you can't tell whether it's on or off. Okay. We wanted to talk to you about the very early years. For years, many years after the discovery of the North American continent, its interior, it just remained the same because the geographic features of the continent didn't allow for easy settlement or penetration. We had the Appalachian mountain ranges, so the early adventurers and explorers traveled using the paths that animal herds and Indians had traveled, and that became the wagon road. And that brought a lot of people to the interior of the continent. Early settlers, adventurers, soldiers, all kinds of people, and even missionaries. So, and it also played a very important role in the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. So, traveling on that wagon road, the early settlers penetrated the interior. Daniel Boone was one of the early adventurers who blazed his wilderness trail into the southern states of Kentucky and Tennessee. But today we're talking about the importance of the wagon road in Hampshire County, specifically Capon Bridge. By 1742, the wagon route was very similar to the route we travel today. Coming out of the state of Virginia, Winchester, Virginia, it followed the route of Route 50, and it passed through Hayfield and Timber Ridge, and then descended into the Mill Branch Valley, and then it split. It took a northerly direction down toward Joseph Edwards' property in the Coldstream area, and the other half of it went south more toward Hardy County and the property of James Cotty. James Cotty had a mill. So we had the two different routes. And then later, on the other side of Capon Bridge, in the Hanging Rock area, the two routes converged and went west again. So we had these two routes. There was development in North River Mills, and on the southern route, a little hamlet called Glencoe. And so settlers would go both ways. Capon Bridge really didn't exist then. According to Dr. Kearns, these two competing routes caused a big controversy in Hampshire County that was second only to the Civil War, because powerful men favored each route. Joseph Edwards and his clansmen favored the northern route toward his property, and James Cotty and his powerful acquaintances favored the southern route. So I want to tell you what happened to that incident. But first I want to tell you about Elias Poston. He was a surveyor who first entered Hampshire County with George Washington. So that was his first look at the Capon River and the Capon River Valley. And he was later to play a very important role in the development of the valley. And by 1781, he was a political player. He was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, and he represented Hampshire County. And then during the years from 1782 to 1798, he made all kinds of important friends and political contacts that he would later use. He was also the sheriff of Hampshire County. He spearheaded get the state legislature to approve the organization of a new town called Watson, which is known as Capon Springs today. And that's where the historic Capon Springs Hotel, which is on the National Register, all the buildings up there are, and it's still alive and well and functioning today. Elias was a census taker. He also counted the slaves in Hampshire County. And as I said, he became the sheriff, so that was a very important position at that time. And he was also a surveyor. So when George Washington recommended that the turnpike be built, Elias Poston became a really important player, and he favored the northern route. And one of the reasons he did was a lawsuit that Shirley was talking about between the Pugh grandsons. They went to court. The court settled the lawsuit by dividing 400 acres in half. Each one got 200 acres. Elias Poston did the surveying for this work. And then he later purchased 200 acres from one of the heirs. He already owned land on one side of the Capon River. With his purchase of the other 200 acres, he was able to install a ferry. The state legislation was passed allowing him permission to operate a ferry. So he did that. And that was a major boon to the travelers who were coming this way. And that was in 1789. And he operated a 24-hour ferry across the Capon River, and not in the area where the bridge is now. It was further down Coldstream on the northern route. Some of the charges were he charged 4 pence for a horse and 4 pence for a man. So that, and he was a visionary who recognized an opportunity, and he really seized it when he built the ferry. And the ferry did promote economic growth in the area, and especially on the northern route. But he died very young in 1803, and his property was purchased by Charles Carlyle. When plans for the turnpike began, Claudius Crozet, who had been an engineer for Napoleon, and I believe he also laid out our capital city of Washington. He was the designer of the Northwestern Turnpike, and he designed 2 routes, an alternate if the terrain was too difficult. But he had indicated to Elias Poston and his friends that he favored the northern route, and James Caudy and his friends also, as I said, they had a lot of political pull. Suddenly, without any explanation, instead of the northern route being taken, the southern route was chosen. And our book tells about the different arguments for each route. One of the arguments for the northern route was that the ferry was already there and they wouldn't have to build a bridge. But the people had been promised a bridge, and they were not satisfied with that. The southern route was chosen and was immediately put into play. So with the construction of the turnpike beginning, all kinds of things started happening. Shirley, do you want
Well, I was going to add there, Poston died at a very, very early age.
Microphone, please.
Yeah.
It's better than me. Now, can you, no? Yeah.
You have to hold it quite close.
You have to hold it very close.
I just wanted to add a little bit about Poston there. Wilmer Kearns once, when we met at one point, said that if Poston would have lived and didn't die so young, he would have been governor of West Virginia. He was quite a mover and a shaker, as you can, as Brenda has read. And maybe you should introduce about the bridge a little bit, and then
Okay.
proof of the bridge.
I'd like to tell you about the bridges.
You have to hold it very close,
I'd like to tell
Brenda.
you about the bridges.
That's better, yeah.
The first bridge was a covered wooden bridge, and it was
You have to
designed
hold it closer.
by Charles Shaw, who was Crozet's successor. It was constructed entirely of wood, and it did deviate from architectural plans because the original plans did not have a roof on the bridge. But it was a covered bridge.
I think that the headset may be better because that's too variable. It goes back and forth.
It was built in the early 1830s, and that's when Capon Bridge became Capon Bridge. The bridge gave the town its identity and its name. And Mike Lee uncovered a very interesting Civil War incident that actually happened on the bridge. And we talk about that in our book. And so if you want to hear the story, you'll have to read the book. But by 1891, the covered wooden bridge had a lot of wear and tear. And by that time, the tannery was operating. So we needed a new bridge. And a new bridge was erected. And it had great longevity also.
So that was the first bridge.
Yes, this is the first bridge, the covered bridge. Put your finger on the second bridge now for us, Beth. That's it. That's the second bridge. And
Doing great.
it also had a long lifespan. It was replaced sometime around 1923 or 1924 by this third bridge, this double arch bridge. And we call that one the Mystery Bridge because it only existed about 10 years. So, and it was made of metal. But the thing that changed everything was automobiles. In 1910, the first cross-country automobile trip was taken from the East Coast to California.
Brenda, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you move the mic just a little closer to your, when you turn your head, we're losing you.
Okay, that better?
That's much better.
Okay. This third bridge with the two arches was just a single lane bridge. It was actually designed for horses and wagons, and so it needed to be replaced. As though in 1933, the bottom bridge came along, and it's the bridge that we know today. I have crossed back and forth across that bridge all the years of my life. That bridge is older than I am. And it was recently restored. And I hope it has many more years. So all of those went together and, like I said, helped give our town an identity. The bridges were designed by various people, but the Wheeling Steel Company built the last bridge. And the plaque on it is 1933. That's when it was dedicated. So we still travel that same route today across the bridge. And now I'll talk to you about some of the other things in Capon Bridge, like the post office.
Nancy, when do they start?
The first post office that served the Capon Bridge area
No visual.
was actually in that little hamlet of Glencoe on the southern
Are there many
route.
slides?
Our first postmaster was Jesse Pugh, and 2 or 3 more postmasters followed him in the Glencoe post office. If you lived anywhere in the general Capon Bridge area, you got your mail at Glencoe. But after the bridge was built, Capon Bridge began to grow. And that meant that Glencoe and North River Mills on the northern route slowly began to lose population. And they just became little hamlets and sidelines while Capon Bridge grew and expanded. So in 1840, the postmaster and the post office was moved to Capon Bridge. And we have a chapter in the book on the post offices and a list of all the postmasters. Lynn LeMaster, who has been a postal employee and retired from the system, did quite a bit of research, and he provided us with a list of the postmasters. Gertrude Ward was probably one of the most memorable postmasters. She was born around Capon Bridge and grew up in Capon Bridge. She served as postmaster for 40 years. Some of you all might remember Ralph Haynes. Gertrude and Ralph Haynes were very close friends. And there's an intriguing story, and we have some pictures to show you, of a gold key. Evidently, Gertrude was a Samuel Cooper descendant. So she actually owned the building, the post office, and the Cooper store, as well as Moss Rock Inn during her lifetime. One of the Cooper relatives, when she married, she went west with her husband, and she took a golden key which unlocked the post office with her. Many years later, about 1989, the Hampshire County Historical Society received that key. One of the relatives on her mother's death had contacted Gertrude and told her she had this gold key. And Gertrude said she didn't want it, to give it to the Hampshire County Historical Society. So the key did return to Capon Bridge and to the Historical Society. It now resides in the Capon Bridge Museum on display with Gertrude's letter behind it. Sadly, even though the key is gold-collared, it was not solid gold. It was brass. What a disappointment. As I said, Gertrude was, she was a postmaster for 40 years. We have other chapters in the book. We have chapters on the school, the churches. I'm going to talk to you about the churches a little bit, and then if you want, we can talk about the schools and the tannery. But a lot of exciting things were happening in the area at the time. One of them was the tannery. There were several tanneries in the Capon Bridge area, but I think Samuel Gard established the first tannery in 1820, and that was on the east side of Capon Bridge of the river. But the largest and the most successful of them was the one that Samuel Cooper opened, and he sold it to the Zepp brothers from Martinsburg. And under their ownership, they expanded it. They hired more people. Charles Zepp was a very energetic and capable man with a real talent for leather. And he really created a little boom town because he built the houses that we call Tannery Row. They were company houses for his workers. Across the road from that on the hill, he built a large house for his brother, superintendent. Beside that, a store. It was a company store where the workers could shop using tokens that were issued by the tannery. Other small businesses sprang up to help support the tannery. The workers needed to be fed, so many of the local women cooked for the workers. And of course, there were salespeople coming through town. They had to have a place to. They needed room and board, so we had inns. We had, and of course, the bridge was really important because all the livestock was driven on foot all the way to Winchester, Virginia, to the slaughterhouse and for sale. And then the fresh hides were loaded on wagons and hauled back to Capon Bridge to the tannery to be turned into wet leather. And the leather company was called Prospect Leather Company. I think it's American Trust Company now, but it's still in business today. So while the tannery was open and operating, Capon Bridge was really growing. This was in the late 1870s. All the houses had picket fences in front of them because when they drove the livestock through town, they were in everybody's yards and gardens without those fences. Eventually, though, even though we had lots of forest, all this bark hauling and these cutting of trees, they exhausted the natural resources, the bark, which was used, in the tanning process. So the tannery closed. It moved to Petersburg, where it could get a fresh supply of bark. And some of the workers also moved with the leather company, and some of them went to Paw Paw. A small tannery was operating in Paw Paw, so they moved there. And then some of them just remained in Capon Bridge. 1912 marked the closing of the American Leather Trust Company, but the company itself is still in business today.
May I ask a question? What happened to all the wonderful old buildings in Capon Bridge?
Well, Capon Bridge still has a lot of its old buildings, but unfortunately, some of them have been torn down. We have a chapter in the book on a lot of the old structures, and they're pretty numerous to mention. But the churches, the Capon Bridge Methodist Church was built around 1890 on land that was donated by the Smith Company family. And then the Presbyterian Church was built on land, was donated by Samuel Cooper. And it's now the Capon Bridge Ruetan Community Center. And so the structure remains intact. And of course the Methodist Church is still in use today. We also had a Methodist church there on Cooper Mountain. I don't know whether you all are familiar with it or not, called Central. The land for that church was donated by George Lupton, and the Arthur Macaulay family donated the land for the cemetery. But the oldest church on the Methodist charge is Capon Chapel. It was located on the southern route, Glencoe, and it's a one-room log structure covered with white clapboarding now. It also has a cemetery, and that's where a lot of Capon Bridge's very early families are buried. There's Captain David Pugh, who was a Hampshire County representative to Virginia before the Civil War, is buried there in the cemetery. And he actually signed the original document of secession when the Civil War came along. William Nixon was a prominent citizen. He was a soldier of the War of 1812. And he married Samuel Cooper's daughter, Martha. And he went on to have several children, and they all were important people. The Christian church in Capon Bridge was built on the site of the old normal school. It was on the west bank of Capon River. And it's now a little white building that's used for storage. And next to it is a newer structure that was built by, I believe Hampshire Home Builders built it. And Jim Hott had his nationwide insurance agency in that building. But the Christian church eventually outgrew the lot because it was right on the riverbank. Horse and buggy days, it was okay, but when people started driving cars, there was no parking. So about 1950, they moved down a Springfield Grade Road, which locally is called Coldstream, and they built a new brick church near the high school. And they're still in that structure today. I wanted to talk to you also about the high school.
Like you mentioned the Tannery Road, those houses are all
Yes,
still there.
and you'll see some pictures of
Big
that.
house sort of the center
Of
of all
those.
the metal buildings. It's all
With the-
house
with-
and all that.
With the schools, there weren't very many opportunities. There weren't very many people that were skilled in reading and writing. They were uneducated. They were very smart men, but they did not have a formal education. So whenever somebody came onto the frontier that maybe had a little education, if enough families could band together and provide an income for him, then he would teach school. But only the families that were paying, the school was not open to everyone, just the families that supported the teaching. And then later, when the state got into the educational picture, they took over the education system. But after they realized the need for teachers, Professor Byron Sine, who was the grandson of the Reverend Christy Sine, who was a Christian evangelist, Professor Sine organized what is called a normal school back then. It was actually a teacher's college, and it stood on the west bank of Capon Bridge, right next to the bridge. It was an enormous building, and we have a picture of it that we'll show you. The students could stay and get an education and room there for like $2 a week. And many of the students there went on to become teachers and important people in the Hampshire County school system later. And that was in existence for to the late 1800s, 1900, 1912, and then it closed, and that's when the Christian church bought the property, tore the normal school structure down, and built a church there, which they later outgrew, and they had to build another church. But the in around 1912, 1910, the citizens in Capon Bridge began to have conversations and meetings about organizing a school for everyone. So funds were raised, and but the project was put on hold until about 1917 because the two districts involved were Capon and Bloomery, and they couldn't agree. Bloomery district was all for the project, but Capon district, which was larger, voted it down. And eventually, when a state law was passed giving the local people more power, they organized, and we had a school board and a superintendent. And a school was built. It was built around 1922. The first graduating class came out of that school in 1925. It was a 4-room white frame building that housed the whole school. It housed grades 1 through, eventually, grades 1 through 12. But there was a lot of financial issues that arose with the school. They were unable to pay a lot of their bills and their expenses. So there was lots of arguments going on, and the Depression came along, and money was non-existent. A lot of the Capon district folks, I guess, were worried about their taxes, and they petitioned the court to have the school shut down. Bloomery district had a surprise meeting and voted to take over the control of the school. And their answer to the financial system was they were going to institute a system of tuition fees. This would have made the people in Capon district bearing the biggest part of the financial burden because they had more students. And in the midst of all this turmoil and controversy, one night the school burned down. In spring of 1932, it burned to the ground. And everybody thought that would be the end of the Capon Bridge High School then. But Carolyn Martin, who was the principal, and A.C. Lovett, and some other prominent citizens there in Capon Bridge rallied together and kept the school in operation. The elementary students went to school in the Methodist and Presbyterian churches. The junior high students went to school in a structure that's no longer there. It was the old Giffen store, and it stood there close in the location of the River House. And then the high school students actually spent for the 4 high school years in the Harrison, what we call the Harrison Whitaker House, but it was known as the Howard Mosee House. Then Howard had been a teacher in the little schoolhouse on Hutchison Hill and continued to teach when the other school was open. But during the years that the high school students were in the Harrison Whitaker House, several entertaining incidents occurred. The school rang into session each day. They had a large school bell that hung outside the house on a tree, and every morning they would ring that bell when school was in session. It was rung at the noon hour to indicate lunch, and then it was rung in the late afternoon to indicate dismissal time. And then the teachers had a small handbell that they would ring to indicate the changing of the classes. One morning, the bells wouldn't ring. Some enterprising students had removed the clappers from both bells. Years later, that same bell was discovered in an outbuilding on the Mosey or the Harrison Whitaker property. And they donated that bell, the Whitaker family did, to the Capon Bridge Alumni Association. The association had it restored, put the clapper back, and that bell now resides in the new middle school foyer. It's in a glass case, and it's waiting to be used again. Another incident involving the students was one Mr. Ed Oates rented the basement of the structure, and he stored some of his farm equipment, potatoes, things like that, in the basement. And the only access to it was an outside door, which Mr. Oates kept a padlock on. He went in one morning and unlocked the door, put the key in his pocket, was inside doing something, and when he went to leave, he couldn't get out. The door was locked from the outside. Well, he yelled and pounded, no avail. I'm sure the students heard him, but nobody said a word. And it wasn't until about 4 o'clock that afternoon when the principal became aware of his predicament that he was released. She went down, he pushed the key under the padlocked door so she could use it, and she unlocked it and let him out. Needless to say, he was very angry. She kept the kids after school that day and attempted to find out who the culprit was, because he was locked in there at the noon hour, but never did find out. And I think one of the most memorable incidents that occurred, and Shirley's uncle Gordon Sloniker was a student during that time. The big old house was very drafty, and it was heated by fireplaces. And Mr. Frank Kearns was a janitor, and he would go through throwing chunks of wood on the fire, tidying up, picking up pieces of scrap paper, and that kind of thing. And that was his routine. And the students, of course, took note of this. They purchased a firecracker, and they wadded up some scrap paper, hid the firecracker in it, tossed it over in the corner of the room. Sure enough, Mr. Kearns came through right on schedule, tidying up, and gathered up the paper and tossed it in the fireplace. Miss Clevenger was teaching a class at the time when the firecracker went off. Smoke and ashes were blown all over the room. She fainted. In all the chaos, the janitor, Mr. Kearns, attempted to revive the teacher by rushing over and putting her ankles above her head. There was no more class that day, needless to say. And again, the culprits were never discovered, but I understand that Principal Martin did have 3 suspects, and I believe the names involved were Sloniker, Williamson, and Giffen. They were on the suspect list. But even though the school went through some really tough times after the fire, and with the students farmed out in these various buildings, the class of 1932 graduated on time. They graduated from the old Christian church. That's where their commencement program was held. And we have a picture of their graduation picture. They're all seated on the lawn there beside the Capon Bridge Methodist Church. And the students continued to go to these various places through the years 1931, that was 32, 33, and then by 1934, the community, along with various people, and FDR was president then, and he had instituted the Works Project Administration. Money became available to build a new brick school. And local labor was donated, local funds. A large part of the community actually built that structure, and that's the brick structure that we have seen a lot of controversy about in the Hampshire Review today. The one that they really don't think it's worth repairing, but it needs a new roof. It really is an important part of our community. Shirley and I both went to school there. And there's still a lot of old Capon Bridge High School graduates around. And the alumni has met there every year. Virus. So I think you will really enjoy reading about the students. And Shirley and I have pictures.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? I wanted.
Here, Shirley, you take this back now.
Our times.
Yeah.
Are we on?
There's a couple things.
Can you hear?
Just take your hand down. Watch your hand touches it.
Now.
Yep.
We're good? Thank you. Touched on, we touched on, Brenda was talking about the Whitaker house.
It's really,
Don't touch that. That's how you hold your leg.
just take it off and use
Speak.
mine.
You're good. Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
She told her to take it off.
Like this. Can you hear now?
No. You've got to put it on, but just don't touch it. When it's-
Bless you. I have so many people that can help me. Now,
There you go. Almost.
It's in and out. Try the other one.
You
right
got
on your mouth. Now
Yeah.
I can not do it.
Are you good?
Don't breathe.
Okay, don't touch it. Good.
Testing. Talk like that.
You gotta have it about,
It's me now.
yeah.
Okay, now I forgot what I was talking about. But Brenda was explaining where the school students graduated or went to school after the school burned. That I just wanted to go back a little bit when all this began and the people started coming from far and near Winchester to Romney with their horses and buggies, and the community started to expand. We had 5 inns in Capon Bridge at one time. Now, there are 2 now existing. Unfortunately, when you come through or come to the bottom of Bear Garden Mountain on the east side, you will pass 3 lonely chimneys. You probably have noticed that. We've lost a lot of our buildings. You were asking about that through demolition and fires, but that was a huge loss, and that was called the Hooks Tavern, and you'll read about that. We had notes about it, but we wanted you to see the photos. But that tavern was a devastating loss to that. That holds so many secrets and stories, and you can also read that in the book. When you come across the mountain and enter into Capon Bridge, on the right there's Fry's Inn, which still exists. That's the big long house that you pass as you are traveling west, right near the road, Route 50. And that has seen a lot of history. And there's a story about it wasn't always Fry's Inn. Initially it was Bell's Tavern. And we have noted through the book that all these taverns all these inns had taverns that were very well populated and, very good, really people that came far and near had to be sure that there was a tavern in each of their inns, so they were very popular. And then on the left side, after you've crossed the bridge, you've maybe noticed driving in from both sides, down near or kind of under the road and behind the old Cooper store, which Brenda described was once our post office and has gone through many, many hands. It's still there, and that is one of our older structures there. But the inn was right beside of that, to the left, going through town, and that was Moss Rock Inn. And that that is a beautiful home that certainly is a iconic home of our town, and a lot of history goes through there. And that's Cotty's descendants on down. You'll see all these names that are identified with that house. And then going up the mountain, Schaffnaker Mountain now, and that was called Parks Valley Mountain at one time. And that's was because there was a Parks family that owned over 1,000 acres in that valley at one point. When I was growing up, I lived in Parks's Hollow, which is now Dillon's Run Road. And so that was a change, and just not so many years ago. But anyway, the Parks house, the Parks Tavern, is in that flat before you go up Cooper Mountain now. And it's in ruins, truly. It's going downhill. Now that home was owned by A.C. Lovett, and then it was sold at, I think, a sale there. I don't remember exactly how that lineage came about, but Ralph Haynes purchased it, and now it's his grandson owns that now. But it's falling down. It's not repairable at this time. But to have 5 inns in a small town, you can see how it was a bustling town during those early years. And just real quick, when we were incorporated, 1902, we had a man, Amos Pugh, who lived in the Giffen Funeral Home and run a store in the funeral home. He was a very powerful person in the town at that time. And he is known as the father of Capon Bridge. But it's interesting to note that he was not on the commission that came to the circuit court in Hampshire County to propose that we become incorporated. The town had grown so that it did need some direction and some rules and laws. They were getting, I suppose, out of hand, maybe. And he saw that they needed some direction. So they appeared before the circuit court, early in 1902 in September, and applied for the corporate application applied to them. And in December of 1902, it became an incorporated town. So there's only 2, your town and our town. And we will merge those towns together in our book, you'll see. But anyway, when that town became incorporated, we were growing, and my husband's grandfather, Harry Hiett, was a businessman. He owned the Ford Motor Company and sold Ford cars and trucks and tractors, and he was an innovative man. The Ford Company, unfortunately, the building burned a couple years ago, 3 years ago now. That building was right near Route 50 before you cross the bridge, heading east on the left. It was a big store building. It went through many other kinds of businesses over the years, but it was initially a store building built by John Smith. Now you'll see that in the book. John Smith came to this area first and owned all the property. After, of course, the Edwards, it was passed down. But John Smith is actually the person that owned a lot of the former Edwards property and buildings. He built that garage, and then it was, like I said, other store owners came to life there after Mr. Hiett. But what I wanted to tell you, the need for electricity and through the town lights and everything, it was gaslighted at that way back when. So he went to the town council that was formed in 1933, I believe, or 31. I won't look at my notes right now, but early on, and proposed that electricity needed to be done in the town of Capon Bridge. Of course, they were all for doing it, but money was an issue, like it still is today, for things to be done in a small town. So he decided, well, I will take a leap, and he bought all the equipment needed to put electric in Capon Bridge. And that he did go on with that. He went on, got all the right-of-ways ready through town and signed all the folks. They were excited about getting electricity. And the Northern Virginia Power Company, which is now Potomac Edison, got wind of that happening in the growing town. So they went before to the town council and proposed that the same thing, that, you know, and they had to vote where the application should go. And was they were leaning toward a local person, and they awarded it to Mr. Hiett, Rick's, my husband's granddad. And anyway, long story short, the Northern Virginia Power Company came to him and said, if you'll give us the rights to everything that you bought for this electricity, we will up that dollar amount and buy it from you. Well, that did happen. Of course, we're now Potomac Edison, but it wasn't without conditions. Mr. Hiett, being a businessman, said, okay, we'll do that. I'll do that. Only if you'll buy my new car for me, which they did, and also that I get free electricity the rest of my life. And so that ended that. But anyway, we want to show you the photos, and we can add to that. And they're long, and I don't want to keep it. What time is it? We don't want to. How long do you usually?
7:25.
We usually go till 8, like 2 hours total.
Okay, all right. Is that okay, Brenda? I mean,
Yes, yes.
we better do that. And then we can just raise your hand when 8 o'clock comes, and we will turn the ending over to our favorite and only director of the library. She has a thing. Thank you for coming.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said the bridge was, the current bridge was in 1933.
Yes.
Was that New Deal money? Did
No,
New
that
Deal
was
provide
state fund, that was state funded for
Okay,
that time.
okay. Because I know the New Deal was funding a whole boatload of things around here. Okay, just curious.
Yeah, good question. All right, we're ready to go. These are two of our favorite people.
I'm going to move over there so I can see the pictures.
Okay, Brenda, can you, okay, I'll just give you that and the trick is right into it. Okay, these are two of our favorite people. That's Dr. Wilmer Burns and Charlie Hall. They're good friends. Quick story about them. When they came to our initial meeting, I think Ken was there too. They were sitting in the car. Dr. Kearns was ready to go back home, and I went out to give him some food to take home, and he and Charlie Hall were sitting in the car, and I just tapped on the window, and they said, I said, excuse me, I didn't want to interrupt, but here's some food. And they said, oh, that's all right. They had their heads bowed, and they said, we were just praying that we could find out more about the wagon road. Okay. This is the grants from Lord Fairfax to Edwards and Cotty in the early days. And there is the division, the 358 acres and the 400 acres of Edwards and Cotty. This is where it is said that we're not positive about this, but it's near or so. This was the Cotty fort, built, not the house now, of course it's long gone, but they said, and it's pretty accurate, that the fort was built where that house now stands. That's on the Bueller property, real near the bridge, really. And this is called Smith Island. That is also on the Cotty property. John Smith and we're assuming they were friends because they raised a child. Neither one were theirs, and he became Smith, and they, I guess, dedicated that island to him. I'm not sure the whole story, but it's always been known as Smith Island. That's, of course, Cotty's castle, or Castle Rock, where he knocked off all those Indians. We'll go pretty fast. This marker identifies the place and what happened that day. There's the date, and there is his grave site. We're not sure which side the Indians on.
Yeah, you're
We
right.
don't know.
High school graduation.
And there's the marker, and I think that's your
Yeah,
dad,
I've got it.
Deb.
There's
I'm not
something
sure. We have one.
The marker was installed by the Capon Bridge Public
I'd like to hear
Yes.
the Indians' version of that. encounter.
Okay, and there is our visitor center, Fort Edwards. And there's the digs where they found many archaeological things that are placed in the Fort Edwards Visitor Center. There is a schematic, I guess they call it that, where they think the walls of the fort were located. And that is, Brenda, you want to explain that
Yeah,
one?
this is an old structure that we were always told was part of Fort Edwards. But it was later determined to be actually barracks that were built at Fort Edwards for the soldiers. But this sits on the site of old Fort Edwards. And this is, other families lived in this house. This is an early photo of one of those families. This is Dr. Kearns' drawing
The division
of the division of the postal. Yes, the Pew heirs property. And this is the normal school I was talking about. You can see it's a very large structure. It was originally built to be a hotel, but it got so much competition from the local inns that that business didn't survive. And then Professor Byron Sine opened his school here. And this is some of the normal school students. And Shirley has something to add about two of them.
The lady on the far right, with right out front, was my grandmother, Seville.
Wow.
And the lady, let's see, where is she? Okay. The lady in the back row, from between the two men, from left to right, is Lily Martin. Now, that is Ralph Haynes's mother-in-law, Ruby, his wife Ruby's mother. They went to school there together and roomed at Moss Rock Inn.
This is Glencoe School, Glenwood School, located at Glenwood. My dad went to school
Brenda,
there.
we're just
Little
not hearing
one-room
you.
school.
You need to hold that closer to your mouth, so.
About 1 inch.
It burned down in the late 20s, and it also was arson. There was never any explanation. This is the colored school. It's a private residence now, but this is the school that was built for the first colored students in the Capon Bridge area. Ruth Shanholtz Schaffnecker started teaching. We only had 2 black families, the Washingtons and the Hamiltons. She started teaching those children in her summer kitchen, and as a result, this little building was built. Like I said, it's a private residence. I believe it belongs to Longo Properties now.
Is that on River Road?
It's on Coldstream.
Coldstream,
Yes.
oh, okay.
This is a clipping about one of the Washington family. They had 20 children. This is a picture of the wooden high school that burned. And this is the infamous graduating class of 1932 on the Methodist Church lawn. And there's quite a few. There's Kiefoffers and Schaffneckers and Gills and Fries and Shanholtzes, Serballs, quite a few. And the principal was E. Grant Nine, and he's in the men's row, the third from the right. He was the principal at the time.
Isn't the tall student in the middle of the back row, wasn't that Lynn Seville?
That's what
Yes,
Had
it
the
is.
orchards here
It
for
is.
years and years.
Yes.
The fruit
He
farm.
looks the same.
He's a very large human.
And this is the Howard Mosee or Harrison Whitaker home. And this is where the high school students stole the bell clapper and set off the firecracker. This is the new brick building that was built to replace the old school. This is where Shirley and I graduated. And this is the bell that's in the new middle school atrium. It's the bell that hung outside during the years of 32 to 34. This is the plaque that, and it says this bell hung at the Capon Bridge School, situated on the Harrison Whittaker property, and is dedicated to the alumni facility by the Capon Bridge High School Alumni Association and the Harrison Whittaker family. That was installed in 2002. This is a very early picture of the Capon Bridge Methodist Church. This is the Presbyterian Church. The land was donated for it by Samuel Cooper and his wife Martha. This is the Christian church that replaced the normal school structure. This is on the west bank of the Capon River, next to the bridge. This is North River Mills, who is located in North River Mills, and it was on the northern route of the wagon road, and it's still open and in existence today. I believe the Capon Bridge Church is second in age, and then North River Mills, and then the Central Church was built a little bit later, the one on Cooper Mountain. This is the Arthur Macaulay family who donated land for the cemetery at Central. And this is Capon Chapel. If you that huge oak tree that you see towering above the church is no longer there, but oral history says that the early settlers gathered under that oak tree before the church was built. That tall tombstone you see there, looking like a miniature Washington monument, is Captain David Pugh's tombstone, the signer of the document of secession. This is a group of people, Hollis Riley, who was a Capon Bridge resident, and his niece Barbara, Paul Mateer, who was minister at Capon Chapel, Gordon Gardner, and a gentleman named John Gott. They placed a wreath at the birthday of the town of Marshall, Virginia, because John Monroe was the creator of Marshall. It was called Salem, New Salem then, but he laid out the town and surveyed it, later moved to Hampshire County, and he was one of the first ministers at Capon Chapel. This is a Sandy Ridge School. Yes, Sandy Ridge School.
Still staying,
And this is the Timber Ridge Christian Church. It's on the Christian Church Road on the upper end near Highview. That is an early picture of John Ward, who, ran the Western Frederick Bank in Gore for many years. He was Gertrude Ward's brother. What is this, Shirley? It's so small, I can't see it.
hoisting one of the weights. All that's
Oh,
that
that's,
video.
Okay.
Henry Slonacre.
Yes.
Let's see if I can get
That's Henry Slonacre that lived on and owned the Beeler property prior to the Beelers owning it. He weighed the animals and the sheep, the cattle, and we were trying to figure out the timeline because when that clipping came out, there was no date or anything, or whoever clipped it out. It wasn't one of ours, but we figured that the time where he lived on the Beeler property, it couldn't have been during that time. It had to have been maybe closer to the road, or there was a road that went through that the animals were on, maybe on a truck or something, and they weighed them. We're not sure about that. This is Mr. Amos Pugh that we were speaking about earlier, that they call the father of Capon Bridge, who lived in that beautiful Giffen Funeral Home and run a store there. That's my granddad's Arthur Slonacre, who was superintendent of the Hampshire County Schools at one time and taught. That's my Uncle Gordon Slonacre, who was one of the culprits that threw off the firecrackers and stole the clapper and all that. He wouldn't want that to be known, but I guess now he doesn't. He won't mind. It was a funny story.
Wasn't he the dean of
And
Shepherd
yes,
College?
Yes.
yes, he was dean of Shepherd College, but he had gone. I did realize I knew he graduated from college very early, but he was the youngest graduate of Shepherd College at age 19. He graduated from school, and he did not. Brenda and I were, and I had to remember that he went from there and taught school in Capon Bridge. He was not principal at Capon Bridge, and went from there as teaching history at Shepherd College, and then went from there to Potomac State College, where he was president for a while, and then spent his last years at Shepherd teaching and as academic dean and teaching a class. And there's a building on Shepherd College named after him. This is Bubbling Springs. Brenda, you take that.
Yeah.
Shirley, I just scanned his master's thesis
Did you?
on the Civil War
Did you?
in Hampshire County, 1941.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but
It's
it'll be good.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
This is Public Springs. It's actually located on the Baker property now, or Cales Ford. But it was owned by Captain David Pugh, and he was a good friend of President Andrew Jackson. Jackson visited him often, and both men lived to a ripe old age, and they attributed their longevity to drinking the waters of this spring, and it's still there today. This is the commencement program of the class of 32. And this is the interior of the program with the listing of the officers and the events. This is a wagon load of lumber being hauled from one of the early sawmills in Capon Bridge. This is a picture of Capon Bridge from the east side, looking across the town toward the west. This is the second bridge, and you can see the stone abutments there, and that's Fry's Inn over there in the background, the white building on the right.
How did you all acquire that photograph?
But people give it up. We found
Some of them, Dr. Kearns had a lot of material, but so did local people.
Dr. Kearns had 114 that he brought into it that first night.
That's
Wow.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
good picture.
this is a picture of the second bridge, and it shows the First Christian Church in the background. This is the second bridge also, at a time when it was in flood. You know, there was a toll charge to cross the bridges. And if you look down there under the bridge on the right, that is some horses and wagons and folks that didn't want to pay the toll, and they forded the river instead. The Hampshire Review had an incident speaking about this, and said one of the stagecoach drivers' horse drowned when he attempted to ford the river. And this is the Capon River. This is actually where the Dillon's Run comes down, and there in front of the that's the old Christian church behind Cooper's store, and Dillon's Run comes in behind there and empties into the river. And when the river gets above the mouth of the creek, then the river backs up in it, and the river runs backward at that time.
Is that the Moss Rock Inn in the back?
Yes, yes. This is a picture of the second bridge, and the river is ice covered. This is another picture of the second bridge. A lot of these pictures are from Gertrude Ward's collection, also. And that large white building there is the old Giffen store building. That's where the junior high students went to school after their first school structure burned. This is a Capon Bridge band, cornet band, during a parade, and they're marching across the bridge. This picture is Captain David's tombstone at Capon Chapel Cemetery. This is Captain William Nixon, who was a soldier in the War of 1812. This is his tombstone. This is William Nixon. We just looked at his tombstone. Shirley, this is the Cotty Wolford house, isn't it?
Yes.
That was originally the Sam Cooper house. Samuel Cooper, Moss Rock Inn, had the store. It was where he started out before Moss Rock was built. It was across the bridge near Moss Rock Inn. And this house, we were trying to figure out, they brought it across the bridge, and it's in the position now at the end of Bear Garden Mountain.
This is a picture of the first covered bridge from the inside. You can see the amazing trestle work. The bridge endured for nearly 100 years. It was remarkable. And the horse and buggy, I believe, the lady in the buggy was one of Hollis Riley's. She was a Monroe. I don't know which lady it was, but that was one of Hollis's aunts driving across the bridge. This is a very early picture. It was given to me by Jewel Rannells of Capon Chapel Cemetery. The tombstone's right there in the foreground. Samuel and Elizabeth Hook, who owned Hook's Tavern. This is an interior shot of Capon Chapel Church. As I said, it's a log structure. You can see those old wide pine boards. And the pulpit is pine. It's beautiful inside. This was the occasion was the celebration of John Monroe's life and the birthday of the town of Marshall. This is the Capon Bridge Lodge Patriots at a picnic. And this is another picture of the lodge members, and that's on the porch of the Giffen store. This is Moss Rock Inn. I took this picture myself several years ago when we had a flood. And you could see the mud line on the shrubbery there. The water was right up to the steps. And this is a very early picture of Moss Rock. It doesn't have the rock ledge. It's got the white picket fence. So this would have been during the tannery years.
Did Mrs. Ward live there? Or Miss Ward?
Yes, Gertrude Ward lived there. This is the house that Charles Zepp built for his brother. The company store was located just below it on the opposite hillside from Tannery Row and next to the Methodist Church. This is A.V. Martin's establishment. It's on top of Schaffnecker Mountain there on Route 50. Some of you might remember it as a Rocky Top club, and they had the best steaks around.
It's still there, huh? Yeah.
It's still open today. It's Jesse James's Bar and Grill now.
The outlaw.
Yeah, this is old house on what was once the Cotty property. It's one of the very early houses. It's been torn down, but it had a log core, and the spring that once supplied Capon Bridge's water on the one side of the river is right beside this house. That's another view of the same house. This is the Towers house that was torn down, and Greg's Restaurant and the formerly the McDonald's was built on this lot. This is the Ford Motor Company garage and structure that belonged to Harry Hiett.
Later, after he had a serious accident and he was out of commission for a while, but anyway, he later sold Studebaker cars and trucks. You can see the Studebaker car there and a truck. And that's just another view. And Nancy pointed out, if you can see that sign, it says ladies' restrooms on that sign. So I guess that was pretty unique. It's right I think that was some, I'm not sure what gas. He sold several different kinds of gas. But right there, the tree's kind of blocking it. But Nancy said, "Did you see that sign? I never noticed that before." But anyway, I'm sure that was a welcome sight.
This is a Capon Bridge service station. It has been many things, including a church. It's an apartment building now, but most of its lifespan, it was a gas station, and later they sold beer. It was built by Clete Whitaker and his wife Corinne, later operated by Floyd and Mamie Whitaker. Then a gentleman, I forget Harry's last name, but locally he was called Baldy, and then later Sparky Grapes had it. But it is now an apartment house.
Did Muse have it? Was it Dark Muse?
Yeah, Dark Muse also had it, yeah. This is Max Oates' house and the office.
Mark, or we just were talking about this gas station. Baldy had it, and then Dark. Interesting thing about Dark, he ran it was really a popular watering hole during those years, and he was also served as he was on the town council, justice of the peace, and the mayor all at the same time while running and he held court behind the bar. So that was kind of an interesting story. This is where the library sits now. You'll see there's a painting here on the right. Yes, same structures. And there's a story, we won't go into that, from Fry's Inn about Jenny Fry. You'll have to read that in the book. But anyway, that was a unique house that I think Dr. T.K. Oates, Dan, is that correct? T.K. Oates built that house? T.K.?
TK.
Uh-huh.
Dr. TK.
Dr. T.K. Oates. Yes. And he lived in that structure, but he was a very important man. You'll see that he was instrumental in establishing Martinsburg Hospital. Anyway, here are the Cotty family. Cotty Wolford that we were talking about that had lived in the little log home at the foot of Bear Garden Mountain. He had a twin brother, and you can see the names there but he was a very planted individual in our little town. And this is Dr. Kearns's picture that he gave us, that Crozet designed the turnpike in the Northwestern Turnpike. That's Crozet map. And this was a symphony. I don't think all the members were from Capon Bridge, but they gathered, and it was a symphony that we could not quite identify. That could be either in the Presbyterian church that has a raised balcony, but we think that might have been too small. It could have been in Moss Rock Inn. It was large enough to have that. But they played all over town.
This is Samuel Cooper. This picture was published in the Hampshire Review a few years ago, but it's the only known picture we've ever seen of Samuel. He was the builder of Moss Rock Inn and the store there in Capon Bridge. I think the store building belongs to Logan Mance now.
Yes.
This is Heffelbauer, who owned property, lots of property down on the northern route, Coldstream, and it later became the Rowland Farm. He built the mansion there. And this is the Dr. Gardner and his wife, the dentist. Yes.
He lived in
Yeah.
I think he came to Romney quite often and stayed at the New Century Hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is another shot of Capon Chapel Cemetery. These are the two. Capon Bridge had two doctors off, a father and a son. This is their tombstones. They're buried at the chapel, and they're related to the Wards. This is Uncle Pudge, who's Dr. Offutt, Dr. J.S. Offutt. He never married, but he was a relative of
uncle of Gertrude Ward's.
That's Dr. Gardner and his wife, the MD.
This is, and we just found this out that there was another Dr. Gardner, but he was the MD doctor, and he practiced over 30 years in Capon Bridge, and we never heard the story about him. But Dr. Kern set us straight, as he always did, and he said, "Oh, I know him," and he practiced his medical services, and he lived on Coldstream Road. So his relatives, I think, got word that we were doing a book, and she's the one that sent us this picture of he and his wife. He was killed in an automobile accident after his wife died. So, yeah, and refresh my memory on this. I know
Dr.
him.
James F. Gardner.
That's him. That is Dr. Gardner, MD. And there's the sad story of Hook's Tavern. I think the same feeling was when the West Virginia School for the Deaf Administration building. That was the same heartache, and this happened very close to the same time.
This structure burned a couple years ago during the arson incidents that were taking place here in the county, all up and down Route 50. I'm sure most of us recall that.
For the Parks is the barn there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. This is a Funkhauser house.
This is not a real old structure, but it was just remodeled, and we were taking a drive around just looking at some of the old houses and realized that we hardly recognized it because the roof was replaced and so forth, but it was built, before the 30s, so we just took a quick shot of that. And this is the old Serball, Otis and Annie Serball house. We're not sure that that's logged, but I would suspect it is underneath of the siding. That's on River Road. No, I'm sorry, Capon Christian Church Road. And this is Nida Peacemaker Serball's home. She and Floyd Serball lived there with their daughter Diane. And Floyd, we called him Frog. I don't know why, but anyway, Frog Serball did every man's hair in Capon Bridge and the surrounding areas, and that was his barbershop. And
Is that
that's,
what they call Frog Eye Serball Road?
well, I don't know the story behind that, but that's maybe his family's from there. This is the Hook house, but the Bernie Hook house, who cooked for the tannery workers, or they could go there or go to the company store and have lunch, but she served dinner. I'm sure, knowing Bernie Hook, where's that? Anyway, that she charged pretty well for her food.
This is an early picture of Fry's Inn. That's Jenny and Hanson Fry's son's car parked there in front. His name was Mayo. And again, you can see the picket fences. This is Gertrude Ward. I believe she's wearing a pink cameo pendant that was a gift from Mayo Fry on her 23rd birthday. This is Garland Giffen, and this picture was taken over in the area called, the old name for it was Trone, Virginia, over near on 610 or Parishville Road at Bethel. And this is Granny Catherine Schaffnaker, an immigrant from Germany, and she owned and operated a toll gate there at the foot of Schaffnaker Mountain. And this is Black Mary Washington, one of the Nixon slaves. She became the property of Martha when she married Samuel Cooper. She was Black Mary was given as a wedding gift to Martha, and she is also buried at Capon Chapel. And this is a picture of a young Hanson Fry. He was Jenny Fry's husband. And is this Sloniker's? This is Henry and Florence Sloniker. He operated the scales. This is the Nettie and Henson Serball house, later belonged to their son John. It's there across from the Liberty Station. And this is a back view of Hook's Tavern as it looked a few years ago. And this is another view of it. It had beautiful double porches. It was. This is an interior shot of the kitchen in Hook's Tavern. You see the huge fireplace. This is Gertrude on her porch in her rocking chair. Shirley, which house is this?
The Serball house.
This is Kenzel and Isabel Serball's house in Capon Bridge. And this is the Monroe house.
T.R. Riley.
T.R. Riley, yes. With unique double porches. This is a little building where Donnie and Peggy Kearns now live, but was once Dr. Offit's office.
It's Kearns' house. Frank Kearns' home.
Oh, this is the Frank Kearns house? Okay.
A later picture.
A later picture of it. And Marvin Miller also lived there. As you recall, Frank Kearns was the janitor of the school during the firecracker incident. This is an older view of the Frank Kearns house. And he was related to Dr. Wilmer Kearns. This is Dart Muse and his son, Butch. Oh, this is looking out your kitchen.
No, it's from our back porch. And we'll hit on the recreation a little bit. That's where a lot of people in our early years came to either ice skate in the winter or swim in the summer. It was called the 40-foot hole, and it still is. But Mike Lee and his brother came and scuba dived all the way down. It's about 12 feet now. But the floods have changed it through the years. And if you look all the way in the background, that's the Beeler property right across from our house in the fields. And we're so thankful that the Beelers got that property. He's a lawyer from Washington, and his family has it and has maintained it just beautifully, and it's just such a pretty sight.
Shirley, does your all's title go back to James Cawdy?
Yes.
I thought it
Yes.
must have been.
Yeah, we're on that part of the river. Yeah, and that's another shot. And if we look real close with them, we can see Cawdy's burial site across the river, straight across, kind of in that curve to the right. This is Mr. and Mrs. Kenzel Oates that run the Green Lantern back in the day when they served gas to people and before the original restaurant was built. And that's an early picture of them, Kenzel and Hazel Oates. That Green Lantern was very popular back in the day, and people drove from far away just to have dinner there.
Love to have
And this is why Bear Garden Mountain is named Bear Garden Mountain. Look at that bear. It doesn't look real, really. It looks like a big stuffed bear. And we have the names of the people that are listed there that hunted that bear down, I guess. But there were more bears. You don't see any bears too much there. There's too much traffic. But that was the kill, and that was quite a monstrous bear.
It's like the Slonikers were involved in that too.
Yes. Let's do this. Yes, we'll go through them real quick. This was the Offit House, which is now Basswood. And you can see, of course, the picket fence. And Dr. J.S. Office built that home, and the Largent family moved in. The John Ward was mostly the man that we knew that lived there, John and Clementine Ward. We're going to stop here and end up a little bit. What's the next? Maybe run through them pretty quick. They can just see it real quick. Did want you to notice this. Look at the painting over on the right that we brought. That's exactly where our library is now built. And that walnut tree has a story. And you can see from the painting, this is part of our story. And that painting was done by Laura Seabright. And we have prints of that. And we brought some tonight if you're interested. And anyway, the walnut tree is very an interesting read. So you can see in the museum there in the background. Let's see. Is this? Yes. This is our decree for becoming an incorporated town in 1903. So we'll stop there. How about that? And just we don't want to keep you any longer. We have some things here. Where's that? It's about that. Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about what you brought and your please.
Well, these are just some things that I brought. This was interesting. Giffen Funeral Home has ties in Springfield, actually, but this old calendar was 1935, and it was a calendar both for the funeral home in Capon Bridge and Romney. And then that picture was also there. That was my Uncle Garland, and he was the funeral director that was in Guthrie Funeral Home in Springfield. And then, but my family, my granddad, B.A., founded Giffen Funeral Home in 1910. And in 1912, he he was over on the Trone Road, like where Brenda was talking about, which borders Hampshire County and Frederick County, Virginia. And he and his wife were there, and they had their store there. And one day, a man was trying to come to pay his bill, and the man didn't have any money, and he said, "Hey, I've got a coffin and some lowering straps. Can I pay my bill with that?" My granddad took it, because bartering was a big thing back then. And my granddad said, there's a need for this. So my granddad started building some coffins, and he became a licensed funeral director. And that is my father and my Uncle Garland were both licensed funeral director for Giffen Funeral Home. And we moved to the building in Capon Bridge on Route 50 in 1950. And before that, they were like River House, housed some caskets, and it was an embalming room, and it was a showroom. The store was between the River House and the home place, which is still there to this day, which is on this side of the River House, big old white house with black shutters, I think. That was my dad's home place. So, they've been in this area since the early 1900s. Oh yeah, one neat story about the funeral home. Back when the previous owners had it, they had slaves, and they loved listening to the slaves singing outdoors, but they didn't necessarily want to see them working. So they had these purple beveled windows that are still in the funeral home to this day. And I know my dad remodeled back in the day. That was one thing. He said, "I'm not going to take those windows out." So it's still there if you ever want to come. And it's around the Mexican restaurant side. So you can't see it from Route 50, but you can see it if you go to the Mexican restaurant. And these two old ones, they're getting a little more faded, but they still have the purple beveled effect there. And that was just kind of a neat story about the funeral home. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to turn the ending of our closing over to our director, and I thank you all for coming and sticking with us. We appreciate it very much. And the rest is in the book. Okay.
If you haven't read the book, buy a copy.
That's right. We have some here tonight if you want to buy one. $26. They're available at the library every day. You can stop in anytime. We also have the posters. They're $10 for the poster itself. We have those here tonight too, if you're interested. This has been a long 3.5 years, but they got it done, and we're very proud of them. And everyone that has read it has loved it, so I hope you all will too. We also have, this always hangs in the front room of the library, and you'll have to read the book to see what this is about, but these are for sale. We have these here tonight also. They're $25 unsigned and $50 signed by Mrs. Seabright. very beautiful. And I think that concludes our evening. Thank you very much for everything, and stop in and visit the library anytime. It's a happening place at Capon Bridge.
Sure is.